1298. 800-965-1298. 800-965-1298.
World Soccer Radio is on the air on Sports Byline USA. My name is Danny Page. A pleasure to be with you on this Wednesday night. No, it's not a pleasure. I'm distraught. I'm upset. I'm unhappy. An absolute disaster for the United States men's national team. Well, listen, I love all of you guys, and I'm thrilled to be here. This was a bad day for the Americans. For Los Gringos, to Jurgen Klinsmann. A disappointing, ultra disappointing performance against the Ukraine. And while I understand that this is not the World Cup, this is the closest we are going to get with our European-based players. And for this team to just go out and it's not the fact that they lost 2-0. It's the fact that they lost 2-0. They created nothing. They defended in no way whatsoever. I'm frustrated about this one. How do you guys feel? Get involved with the show. World Soccer Radio on Sports Byline USA. Give us a call. 800-878-PLAY. That's 800-878-PLAY. Or send me a tweet at World Soccer Radio. At World Soccer Radio. Nick Gieber, the Gieb, he's out this week. I'm in for him all week long. My name is Danny Page, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. If you're listening on one of our many affiliate stations, nice to be here on this Wednesday night. Like I said, I'm not thrilled. I'm not too happy where we are with the United States national team. We're going to get to that. Our MLS previews roll along with Paul Dolan, at Dolly the Goalie, former Major League Soccer goalkeeper, now part of the Vancouver Whitecaps television commentary team. Paul Dolan joins us a little bit later on the show. All right, you can listen on iHeartRadio. You can listen on TuneIn. And what up to our men and women in uniform listening across the country and around the world on the American Forces Network. Again, my name is Danny Page. I'll be here with you the rest of the week. MLS previews continue. We'll talk a little Spain, Italy. Does anybody want to talk about England? Danny Sturridge keeps rolling, this time for country instead of club. It didn't matter what shirt he was wearing. He scored the winner today in that friendly. A lot of topics to get to. We will hit them all with you over these next 60 minutes. I'm D Page. It's WSR. Hit me up on Twitter at World Soccer Radio. Jam-packed show ahead. Here we go, yo. We'll be right back.
Still one thing to do. Get down the pub and have a few.
You're up.
All right, World Soccer Radio rolls along here on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. My name is Danny Page. Great to have you with us. You can also watch the stream, watchwsr.com. Nick is gone away from our lead studio. I'm running things up here in Santa Barbara. You can see the shirts behind me here in my studio. Spain, Argentina, a little Messi jersey I picked up down there during the last World Cup, and the United States. And whenever the United States plays an international match and it falls on a show day, which is, for the most part Wednesdays, sometimes Fridays, I like to wear the jersey. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it today, could I? I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And, there is a certain camp of people out there that are saying, and reasonably so, that are saying, well, this was just a friendly. It's not a big deal. Friendlies don't really matter, and they don't. They don't count for anything. All that counts is what happens against Ghana and then Portugal and then Germany. Yes, I said Ghana, Portugal, and Germany. That's really the first issue, is that's who we open with. And that's who we take on in the group stage. But when you looked at not just the result, not just losing to the Ukraine, which, by the way, total disclaimer, it's great for them to get a key result today, for their confidence, for everything that's going on with that country. I don't know about most of you, but, I pretty much follow it on a daily, if not sometimes hourly basis. Really nice result. The players went out and played as if they weren't a bit distracted. It makes you think back to the playoff against France and say, wow, it's unfortunate that this team didn't make the tournament. Political issues, notwithstanding, that has nothing to do with it. They just played well. Their wingers were dangerous. Their defenders looked solid. But if this is half of the United States national team, I think we're talking 1998 wooden spoon here. We're talking one of the worst teams at the World Cup. And I understand the game doesn't mean anything. And it's not just that we lost. It is the way we performed. Speaking of lost, our center back pairing, two players who had an opportunity to play their way into the 23 that eventually get called in early June. Obviously, there's a 30-man roster, but the 23 that are, then headed to Brazil late May, early June, I don't think either of them stand a chance. Oguchi Onyewu, he just has lost it. Obviously, some really challenging injuries he went through. He looked like he was still injured. And John Brooks, John Brooks could end up being a great center back one day. He was not a great center back today. He was very poor. Jeff Cameron did seem a little bit out of place. Again, something I said on Twitter. Hit up our Twitter, by the way, at World Soccer Radio. Something I did say on Twitter is that I think Jeff Cameron belongs on the field no matter what for the United States in any of a number of positions, and I still believe that. I still think his best spot, I know he's been playing it right back for Stoke, I still think his best spot may be in the defensive midfielder position that would allow Mike Bradley to go forward and flourish a little more, as we've seen him do at times in his career when given a more free role. Jermaine Jones, how is he going to cut it in the middle? If you make defensive mistakes and you fall asleep at the wheel, in the way that this U.S. team did tonight, we will get absolutely blitzed in the group stage. Forget about Germany and Portugal. Ghana will run over us. It just was so apparent that the cohesion and the consistency, because there are a lot of players who haven't necessarily played together, it was completely lacking. So obviously defense sticks out the most. And the fact that the two goals that we gave up were just very blatant, defensive miscues. It's not as if it was, incredible individual play and well-built pressure from the Ukraine. It's that we were just bad. We were just awful. Reading tweets here at World Soccer Radio. This is from Edward Hart. USMNT more like Los Turdos. I don't think that's a word in Spanish, Ed. That was a disgrace. Yes, we were. We were. I don't want to say we were a disgrace. We were just very, very bad. And what is that now? 3 games on European soil without a goal. This downward turn after that record run of wins is extremely disappointing, going back to the games against Scotland and Austria. 3 games on European soil without scoring. And, yeah, it's great that Josie Altidore had a hat trick against Bosnia, but this is a very different team right now than than the team that had won, back-to-back European games, back-to-back games in Europe for the first time. Altidore looked more than off. I think, a lot of people think that just because he doesn't play for Sunderland, that doesn't mean he can't have an impact in the World Cup. I don't necessarily agree with that school of thought, but he was very poor today. Clint Dempsey, he's getting older. We know that. Well, we're all getting older. But him getting older is more important than, let's say, me getting older. He just doesn't seem to be himself, does he, for the United States national team? Same thing has been going on for Seattle. Obviously, Landon Donovan wasn't in there. I think Landon is sort of the match that starts the fire in a lot of cases. But this was a really hapless, poor performance. Edgar Castillo made the long trip from Tijuana to have his opportunity to stake a claim. He will not be going to the World Cup in Brazil with this United States men's national team. And I just hope the domestic team puts on a better performance against Mexico, and I know that's kind of a B friendly, not an A friendly, when you consider the squads that will be there. But it's just scary to say this group has a lot of work to do, and we're 2 months away. The tournament starts in 99 days, 98 days now. 2 months away from our 30-man selection. 9 weeks away from starting camp, and we look like it's, August 2011. We look so lost. I think the head coach doesn't necessarily have a grasp on who needs to be in there, something I don't, entirely blame him for. It hasn't exactly been easy on Klinsmann and company when choosing who they wanted to have be a part of this squad. But we're a mess. Can this group even score a goal in the tournament? And maybe they'll surprise. Maybe when the bright lights come on and the TV telecast in Brazil start and the footballing world's eyes are centered on you, perhaps then the U.S. team can turn it around. I think it's possible. I'm not saying that we will be terrible in the tournament because of what happened today. I'm saying that today we looked terrible, and that if this is the type of performance that the U.S. team puts together at the World Cup in Brazil, we will fail, and we will fail miserably, 1998 style. Don't you think I don't remember that wooden spoon? What was it? Yugoslavia and Iran or something like that? Oh, that hurts. It hurts. It's the moment that U.S. soccer fans look forward to for 4 years, with the exception of the even-numbered final the year after, against Mexico in the Gold Cup, the year after the World Cup. That's always kind of the highlight outside of the group stage games. Obviously, the game in Columbus is a highlight every cycle. But the tournament's what we look forward to most, and I'm not feeling very optimistic. Are you feeling optimistic? What do you think? Give me a reason to smile today on this Wednesday, March 5th, as we're 98 days till the World Cup kicks off now. Full coverage here on World Soccer Radio, that tournament. We're going to talk about this a little bit more. We'll talk about this game a little bit more a little later in the show. I want to talk about a couple strikers and their performances in Europe. Danny Sturridge, Diego Costa. He was rather invisible on the day, but I still think he can be a big-time difference maker. Get involved with the program at World Soccer Radio. That's at World Soccer Radio. Yesterday we had some great MLS info, talking Chivas USA, talking DC United with Ben Bromley. We're going to talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps in our next segment. Paul Dolan, our guest. Paul, of course, a former Major League Soccer goalkeeper. He is now on the television broadcast teams for the Whitecaps. I think he's doing some broadcasts for Toronto FC as well. Greg Sutton, another former Major League Soccer player who now is on the broadcasts for the Montreal Impact. Greg's going to join us tomorrow. So back-to-back goalkeepers from north of the border. I love this, that are now TV guys. Even better. Those are our guests the next couple days. All right, I'm going to get off of this, this ho-hum U.S. performance, and we'll move over to MLS and maybe get your thoughts a little bit later on this performance, if we want to call it that. We'll take a timeout on WSR, and we will be right back with Paul Dolan from the Vancouver Whitecaps. See you in a sec. All right, we are back on World Soccer Radio. My name is Danny Page. Always nice to be with you here on this Wednesday night. Like I said, I'm just bumming a little bit. You see the headline below me, red, white, and blues. I got the blues. That was brutal. That was just absolutely brutal. But we're going to get away from the U.S. men's national team, thank goodness, for a good chunk of the show here. And we'll bring in Paul Dolan, obviously, who a former pro who has now jumped into the broadcast booth. And, Paul, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you, my friend.
It's good to be on the show.
Oh boy, Paul, did you watch any of the internationals today? Did you see my gringos out in Cyprus against the Ukraine?
I didn't, but I saw the Denmark-England game, and we've got Sportsnet World here that shows all the other games, some big fixtures in terms of names, not
Right.
a lot of importance, obviously, in the friendlies, but I kept abreast through Twitter, and it sounded like it wasn't very good. I guess
awful.
The defense in particular was a bit off the mark. And I'm not sure. Did you get to see all the game? I heard that there were some interruptions with the broadcast feed.
Yeah, there was about a 3-minute interruption on the feed, but let me put it this way, okay? I was obviously on my computer working and on Twitter, and Paul, I would have rather sat there and looked at a completely blank screen for 90 minutes than what than what unfolded on that field. It was just brutal, and the problem
well, now
was
you know what Canadian soccer fans feel like now, because we get that 365.
Oh my gosh! I mean, it was just awful. And yeah, the defense was terrible. The center back pairing, that probably wouldn't be the center back pairing to start the World Cup anyway, was pretty poor. And I love Oguchi Onyewu. He's a good player and a good guy. But more than that, we didn't really create more than a couple half opportunities. I mean, there may have been 1 or 2 shots on target, but that is also it was kind of a rough day, Paul. I'll be honest.
Well, from what I heard, the players whose stock rose the most was the players who weren't there. So
No, definitely.
That's not a good sign when you get a chance to finally stake a claim or make yourself as someone that might be suggested to go to the finals in Brazil and just don't take your chance. But, I know what it's like as well. We had a game against Armenia, and I think it was at the same stadium in Cyprus just a couple of years ago with Canada, in front of a sparse crowd of 100 people or so, and we had hail and cold weather on the day. Surprisingly, I think one of the coldest days ever in Cyprus.
Sure.
And very difficult for the guys to get up for the game. But you would have thought that the players trying to get on that plane to Brazil would have done everything they could to get the attention of Jurgen Klinsmann, and I guess that's disappointing. But as I've seen on Twitter, better it now happen, so you know whether the players can play in the big games or not, than to have that happen in June.
Yeah, I'm worried that they were doing all they could to get on the plane, and that was still the performance. Hey, before we get into the Whitecaps here, how was England? How was Danny Sturridge's winner? He seems like he's definitely going to be leading the line come Brazil with Rooney playing behind him. That's my prognostication.
Yeah, and those guys are. I didn't see the whole game, but
Right.
I did see the goal. It was a very well taken header, set up from Lallana, who's got all the ability in the world, very un-English-like in some respects, but he set the whole thing up, and Sturridge was a straightforward header. But he had to cushion it nicely beyond Kasper Schmeichel, Peter Schmeichel's son, in the Denmark goal. And it was kind of a dour performance overall. Again, kind of what you expect in these international friendlies, but they did enough to get through.
All right, let's get into Major League Soccer a bit. Dolly the goalie, right? Paul is your nickname. You're in the Canadian Soccer Hall of Fame, obviously. Talk to me about being a part of the Whitecaps organization, your experience there, and really what your position is with the team now.
Well, it goes way back, Danny.
Really?
I was drafted by the Whitecaps in the North American Soccer League in 1983.
No way.
And, of course, the league promptly folded as soon as I signed papers to become a professional.
So you never actually played with the league?
No, I trained a few times with the outdoor team, and then there was an indoor season before the whole thing kind of fell apart. And from there, Tony Waiters, who had been the coach in '79 with the Whitecaps, took on the Canadian national team duties and took me as a young player under his wings. And I was able to play in the World Cup in 1986 in Mexico for Canada at the age of 20.
Right.
But it was all downhill after that. I had a short stint in England, but did come back to play in the Canadian Soccer League for Vancouver in 1988. And we won a couple of championships there through 10 years that I played for Vancouver. And then, of course, the team now in the Major League Soccer League. And so initially I did the radio in the first year in 2011, and I did television for Sportsnet the last couple of years. and I'll be doing some of the pre- and post-game on the radio this year, as well as doing some games for Toronto FC. So I get a chance to bump over and see some of the up-and-coming things that are happening with the Toronto Football Club this year. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Talk to me, Paul, about the kind of vibe and excitement around the Vancouver Whitecaps. Obviously, there's there's a lot of buzz when a brand new franchise starts, and then it can kind of temper down a little bit if the team isn't top of the league. Where's the team right now?
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see on Saturday what the reaction of the crowd is, because the support in Vancouver has been tremendous, and it has a very good history going way back to the North American Soccer League, but even through those Canadian Soccer League days and USL, it was always a well-supported team in a city that loves soccer and has a big soccer history, both with the national team and, of course, with the Whitecaps and the 86ers before them. But in year one, you saw very good crowds and a lot of optimism. It was a terrible year for the club. They finished second to last in the standings, but were able to make the playoffs the next year. And I think a lot of people thought, and certainly the club has invested enough to want to become a winner. It's not as if they've sat back and not spent and tried to make moves. They're on their fourth manager now in 4 years and are trying to do the right things. It didn't work out so well last year, not making the playoffs, but I think it's kind of the tortoise and the hare over this off season where everything seems to be coming together for Vancouver here right at the death, right before opening kickoff. Today they announced Pedro Morales, who's joined them from Malaga, the Chilean number 10. Yeah. And from all accounts, he's going to be a player that will really help this team. They lacked that last year. Daigo Kobayashi was brought in, the Japanese international, who was supposed to be the player who had looked to Kenny Miller and Darren Maddox to get all those goals, and it ended up falling on Camilo to kind of create a ton of the goals that he scored last year really on his own. So they've got a playmaker in place now, and I say it's all coming together at the last minute because, of course, he's just signed today. And Matias Lava, at the other point of the diamond, if they play in a 4-4-2 diamond or at the other end of the midfield anyway, as he'll sit in a holding role, just joined the club last week, and that was a huge DP transaction for Vancouver as well. So I like the pieces that they're putting in place kind of at the last minute here to go around some of the other good spots that they've got. Nigel Rio-Coker, who they've, again, signed an extension to his agreement, Jay DeMerit, and Andy O'Brien in the back. So there's a good spine of players, to include Kenny Miller right at the top as well. So a good, well-rounded team with some good experience and a lot of young players still, too.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the real hole to fill, as we're chatting with Paul Dolan here about the Vancouver Whitecaps, it sounds like the real hole to fill was that playmaking role, was the number 10 role. And that's not an easy spot to fill, is it? Obviously, when you have Miller up front, you have Jay DeMerit holding things down, at the center half position, but really someone to provide service for the players up front.
And, I spoke to Bob Lenarduzzi in the offseason, and as was almost everyone in Major League Soccer who had a chance to watch Diego Valeri in Portland. That's the kind of player he wanted to bring into the squad, and they've been able to do that through contacts, I think, that Carl Robinson has overseas. And by all accounts, again, having only seen the YouTube clips and hearing bits and pieces, because he hasn't even really trained, aside from just a little bit here today with the club, you get the sense that he's the type of player that can do the things that the Whitecaps are looking for him to do. They want to be a much more possession-oriented team. They brought in a couple of Uruguayan players, young Uruguayan players, who throughout the preseason have looked the part in terms of pass and move, quick one-touch, playing into space, working off of each other. And to bring Pedro Morales into that now and have the other players that I mentioned there kind of anchoring their positions, as I say, I think it's a much more well-rounded team than they had last year, where they really were relying on their front three, and particularly Camilo.
Talk to me about Kenny Miller and now Nigel Rio-Coker. What's it like to have two, I won't say stars from the UK. No, Kenny Miller was a star at one point, surely, for Scotland. What's it like to have him and Rio-Coker, who's a Premier League veteran? What's it like to have them in the team? How does that add to the excitement as well as, the ability on the field?
I think they both add something that's very valuable, obviously experience being one, but each of them, I think, has done a really good job in mentoring, tutoring the younger players. And in particular, Nigel Rio-Coker has done a terrific job with Russell Tybert.
1 minute till music.
Last year, he really kind of flourished, especially in the early part of the season, ended the year with 9 assists, the young Canadian, and it
Yes.
was a lot down, I think, to Nigel Reo-Coker, really pushing him along in training and really kind of championing his cause under Martin Rennie, and of course Carl Robinson as an assistant coach. And Carl Robinson can take a lot of credit for doing that as well. He's been an excellent mentor for some of these young players. But Nigel Reo-Coker had a real influence in games in which he put a stamp on it. When he decided to play, and there was times when, as you would,
I mean, that happens with these guys, though, sometimes.
Every now and then, you get a sense that sometimes an away game where, maybe the crowd isn't as big or the occasion not as big or what have you. And again, you got a lot of travel in the long seasons and the warm weather sometimes is not used to. There'll just be games when they don't stand out as much. But in those games when he went on those surging runs or made a crunching tackle, he really put an imprint on the team, and, it influenced the way the rest of the team played. And he did that from mainly a central midfield role, but also in the right back position sometimes. And Kenny Miller did the same thing with the forwards. Very instrumental player. The Whitecaps, I think, only lost twice last year when Kenny Miller started for Vancouver.
Sure. I mean, he seemed to be, he seemed to be such an influential player. Paul, can I cut you off for a sec? We got to go to a quick break. Can you hang through the break?
Yeah,
and we're going to talk about Kenny Miller a bit more.
Okay.
All right. Kenny Miller, the Scotland, maybe not legend because they didn't make the international tournaments, but one of my favorite players to watch for Scotland in recent years. We'll talk about him a little more on the other side of the break. Get your questions in for Canadian Soccer Hall of Famer Paul Dolan. Hit us up at World Soccer Radio on Twitter. A quick break, and we'll be right back on WSR.
IRA guide.
World Soccer Radio rolls along here on Sports Byline USA. My name is Danny Page. Pleasure to be with you here on this Wednesday night. Thank goodness Paul Dolan came on the show tonight. Canadian Soccer Hall of Fame, and I think he's cheering me up a little bit. I'm kind of back in the zone here. It was just rough. It was just rough. So you played in Mexico in the 1986 World Cup, Paul.
Yeah, I did. They said I was the youngest goalkeeper to have ever played in a World Cup.
Really?
Now, I don't know if that's still true, but at that age too, you're thinking, geez, we're going to be back here again in 4 years and 8 years and 12
years.
4 or 5 World Cups under my belt. But you know the rest of the story with the Canadian national team, unfortunately.
Yeah. Who did you play against? What matches? I was 2 years old then, so I don't exactly recall.
Make me feel old.
No.
We played against France, Hungary, and USSR, Russia. So I had a chance to play against, at that time, the first game, France, who were the reigning European champions. And I think they finished third in that World Cup. Michel Platini and Jean-Pierre Papin, some tremendous players, really well-known, recognized team. Beautiful team to watch. And on the day, we lost 1-0, but it was a brave fight from the Canadian troops. And as I say, we all felt that off the back of the North American Soccer League and everything that did to help those young Canadian players, that we would have a chance to get back there over the course of the next number of years. But it's been a difficult ride since then for us, unfortunately. Yeah,
I want to get back to the Whitecaps in a second, but what do you see? I mean, this would be a show-long discussion in some ways. But, what do you see as being a real key for Canada to kickstart the national team, to get into that spot where they're qualifying for the World Cup ahead of Costa Rica? Even get back in the hexagonal ahead of Honduras, even ahead of the United States or something like that. What needs to happen?
Yeah. Well, you're right. It's an hour-long show with respect to that, and there's no quick fixes, or they probably would have been addressed by now. Everyone's trying to do different things, and credit to the association. I think they've done as much as they can over the last number of years, especially under new leadership now, to try to put measures in place that allow for better coaching at a younger age, allow for a long-term player development, which they've put into place. But, something as simple for me as young Canadian soccer players having a passion for the game. And I think MLS is going to help in that regard. I know as a young kid when I first started following soccer, it was because of the Vancouver Whitecaps. I was only 10 years of age, but I went to a Whitecap game and really caught the bug, really had a passion for it from a very early age. And there was two things there. There was that passion to want to play because I enjoyed the game, but there was also that aspiration of wanting to play for the local professional team. And without that for such a large number of years in Canada, sure, there's the goal of maybe getting to Europe or what have you, but with hockey being such a huge sport here, and even baseball and football and other sports, I think some of the talent pool is diluted. And, we're a smaller nation in terms of sheer numbers, certainly not, versus some of the other countries in the world that have produced good players, but we don't have that single-minded focus on soccer like some of those other countries do. I think that, with MLS in place and young players having that goal to attain, that so many of the kids who are playing now at least have a goal to try to shoot for. I think that's going to help in the long run. Yeah,
I think that's part of the issue with the U.S. too. I mean, if you look at the athletes in the United States, a lot of the guys that play in the National Football League, while they're in some cases a lot bigger than professional soccer players, nonetheless, if you added some of those athletes into the mix for professional soccer, I think we'd be right near the top. But
absolutely, it's I coach young soccer teams, and I can't tell you the number of times the best or second best soccer players on our team have stopped playing soccer because their time's committed now to ice hockey or to volleyball or basketball or whatever else it is. That dilution definitely happens, whereas in other countries, it's soccer or bust for the most part, isn't it?
Absolutely. My contention is LeBron James would be the world's best goalkeeper. Okay.
He probably would be. You're right.
6'8". There's no getting by him. Let's get back to the Vancouver Whitecaps. We're talking with Paul Dolan, Canadian Soccer Hall of Famer here on World Soccer Radio. So Kenny Miller, we were talking about Kenny Miller, and I think it's timely that Robbie Keane just signed a new 3-year extension a couple hours ago with the LA Galaxy.
Yeah.
Can Kenny Miller establish himself in that same vein in Major League Soccer that Robbie Keane has? Be here for a long time, be productive for a long time, and score a lot of goals?
I think he can. Now, he is 34 years of age, and but that doesn't necessarily mean that you completely dry up in terms of goal production. We saw that last year. As I said just before the break, he was very influential when he started for the Whitecaps last year, just losing a couple of games, I think it was. And his goal turnover was pretty good as well. I think he scored 7 goals, and then he was injured, and that's going to be the big question mark in whether the Whitecaps extend his contract. He's only signed till June again, as they did last year, and then they extended it for another year. But we've seen him score at the highest level. A beautiful goal against England last year at Wembley.
Right.
And he scored some great goals this year. And a lot of the goals, too, were down to his sheer determination and willingness to get into the right areas and get back and pick up the ball. And, he created a lot himself. It wasn't just tap-ins, let's put it that way. So I think he did have a good influence on the team when he played. That big question mark that I think everyone has is the longevity thing.
Absolutely, at 34. But again, we saw him do it. We saw him do it last year against England. You've been a part of the organization since the Major League Soccer move, doing radio and television. As someone that's been with the Whitecaps during that period, and you've seen obviously Montreal come in the league, you've seen Toronto add these stars. Kind of take me through the way that Whitecaps supporters and staff members and players view the other two teams and view the game professionally in Canada in general.
Well, I think a lot of people who, when they think of Major League Soccer, they didn't really keep a lot of tabs on it until Toronto FC came into the league in 2007. And at that time, there was a lot of interest from the West Coast, I think with a long-term view of hoping that the Whitecaps at some point would get in. But I didn't think a lot of people really thought that would come to fruition for at least 10 years, and then things were kind of fast-tracked. As I said, Vancouver's always been a well-supported team in the lower leagues, too, in Division 2. And they have a very good ownership group, one that's aggressive and wanted to commit itself to Major League Soccer and not just commit itself to getting their toes in the water, but to diving right in and building as good a team as possible. And so, after those years with Toronto where things kind of, they didn't go well, did they?
No.
They never made the playoffs and over a number of years. And so since then there's been a really big rivalry. We have the Canadian Championship that brings out the winner to go into the CONCACAF Champions League.
Yeah.
The games between those two teams have really been heated for whatever reason. It's the fact that you have, before Montreal came in last year, the year before, you had two teams that really didn't like each other because they had played each other as a Division II team, the Whitecaps, against the MLS team in Toronto FC, and upset them one year. And so right from then there was quite a rivalry as well. But I think now having all three teams in, and the three teams, Montreal, you have to say, has been a success, even though they kind of crashed out of the playoffs last year.
Right.
And Toronto having not made the playoffs, but what they've done in the offseason here has rekindled an interest where they've sold 17,000 season seats. Unreal. And have had to top it so that they can leave some, at-once tickets available. So I think there's a rekindled interest right across the country, and I think there's a good-natured rivalry there as well. And I think the more important thing overall for a lot of the supporters is how that will help develop players for the Canadian national team with their academy system is in place.
So the clear rivals, despite the geographical proximity to Seattle and Portland, the clear rivals are the Canadian teams, Montreal and Toronto, for the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Oh, absolutely. But I would say that the biggest rival for the Whitecaps is still the Seattle Sounders.
It is still the biggest rival. Okay. What's the distance? About 300 miles, 400 miles, something like that?
It's only about 150 miles from my house. I'm right on the border here in South Surrey, and from Vancouver proper, it's not much more than 150 miles. So it's only a couple of hours down the I-5, depending on the border lineups.
Right.
And because that rivalry goes right back to when both teams came into the North American Soccer League in 1974 and also went through the Division II days in USL and the A-League. Just that proximity of having traveling fans and whatnot, I think, makes that the strongest rivalry. But in saying that, Portland's been a terrific rival as well. and again going back to NASL and through USL and the proximity. So as much as Toronto and Montreal through the Canadian Soccer League days has been a huge Canadian rival, it's kind of like there's 4 really strong rivals of the Whitecaps, which is great. That's what you want, I think, in any type of atmosphere when you're going to the stadium.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. So it's nice for Vancouver to have 4 rivals, let's say. What trips and games are you looking forward to most? And ultimately, what do you think this team does this year?
I'm really looking forward to the opening game on Saturday against New York Red Bulls.
Yeah.
I think New York fans are curious to see what kind of team they've got without having done a lot of off-season maneuvering. And I think the Whitecaps are really curious to see how their team has all kind of come together at the last minute here will perform against the Supporters' Cup champions. So that's a big one for me. Obviously, the rivalry games that we spoke about are going to be big ones as well. But I think the Whitecaps will have a decent year. I wouldn't have said that probably a couple of weeks ago before the signing of Matthias Laba, who everyone raves as being, one of the best defensive midfielders in the league, or the potential to be. He's only played a dozen games or so for Toronto before coming over, but has all the ability. And how Pedro Morales will work in that more creative role. So I'm very much looking forward to it. But I think the Whitecaps can sneak into the playoffs here in this very tough Western Conference.
Great stuff, Paul. Thanks for taking a lot of time out with us today. Great to share your stories and opinions of things in the past, now present, and, of course, the future for the Whitecaps. Thanks again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Danny. Anytime.
Okay. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Paul Dolan, awesome guy. Awesome guy, right? Big thanks to Paul at Dolly the Goalie, Canadian Soccer Hall of Fame, at the time the youngest goalkeeper ever to play in the World Cup. Mexico and Nigeria, by the way, are scoreless. That game just underway, 5 minutes into the second half, and at least there's something to make me happy, something where I can smile. The conversation with Dolan was awesome. That was a nice addition to the show here on this dreary and depressing Wednesday, man. Is anybody else bummed about this U.S. team? I'm going to try to get away from it. We'll talk about the U.S. team a little bit more on Friday's show. I'll be joined by Joe Curley, a journalist who's a very close friend that has covered the U.S. at a World Cup before. He was in Germany, covering the United States men's national team. So we'll get Joe's opinion. We'll obviously, break down the Barclays Premier League matches as well. I just want someone else's opinion who covers and follows this team closely. It was just a bad performance, and I just can't get away from it. I can't get away from the thought that we just incredibly disappointed today, and that parts of this group are going to be on the field against Ghana in less than 100 days. Or I guess that game, like I said yesterday, it's like 102 or something like that. Now is one rare moment, where I wish the World Cup was further away, because this team seems like it needs another year. Oh, maybe our stadium doesn't get done in time. We're supposed to play. No, I'm just joking. All right, time out here on World Soccer Radio. My name is Danny Page, in for Nick Gieber this week. Fun to be with you guys. Send me your final tweets here on Wednesday at World Soccer Radio. That's at World Soccer Radio. Big thanks to former pro Canadian Soccer Hall of Famer Paul Dolan. A quick timeout, and we'll be right back, guys. All right, closing out World Soccer Radio on Sports Byline USA. My name is Danny Page. A new segment today I want to introduce. We'll see if it'll stick around when Nick comes back next week. Penalty kicks. Our final thoughts from today's action and everything we talked about today. Just a couple thoughts on the international matches. The Netherlands, not so much. They were beaten by France. I really think this team has not reloaded in any way. They've lost some key players. Key players have surely gotten older. Van Persie, Sneijder, Robben. I don't think the Dutch are going to do much this summer, and they obviously open against the reigning world and European champions. How about brilliant Brazil? What a start to the morning. Neymar was fantastic. Oscar, he doesn't get a chance to shine as much for Chelsea because he has to do a lot of the dirty work. He has Eden Hazard around him, but man, he was special. Diego Costa, he will come at a cost for the Spanish. Maybe we'll get to it a little bit more tomorrow. I think he can be a star, but it's going to take time for him to fit into that Spanish system. It's a very different system than he's used to. The controversial switch from Brazil to Spain, but no less. I think big stuff ahead from the Spaniard now, the Brazilian turned Spaniard, coming up at this summer's World Cup. I think he'll be fine. Last but not least, Dan's the man. Danny Sturridge, not me, by the way. Danny Sturridge scored that goal. He could be the answer to England's problems up front. It is not Danny Welbeck. It is Danny Sturridge. Adam Lallana obviously staking a claim as well for that spot on the right with Walcott gone. So really, we learned a lot today from a lot of teams. I hope we didn't learn anything from the United States. I hope it was just a complete wash. We can walk away from this one as a very different team. Been a pleasure being with you today. Big thanks to Paul Dolan for joining us and our boys up in San Francisco. Thanks to the crew up there at Sports Byline. My name is Danny Page. Awesome to hand off the next penalty kick to the one and only Ron Barr here on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. For archive versions of this show and all our other shows, visit watchwsr.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Brand new show, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, World Soccer Radio, Sports Byline USA. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.